our agenda is what is red teaming versus penetration testing, types of red team engagement, red team attack life cycle, understanding the Mitre attack framework, and understanding reconnaissance and enumeration in Active Directory environments. So when we are talking about red team is a full scope adversary simulation designed to test an organization's detection and response capabilities, not just its technical vulnerabilities. So we are not only talking about the vulnerabilities here, right? It is a full scope adversarial simulation. What is an adversary? So when we are talking about adversary, adversary basically means opponent, right? Now when we are talking about this opponent, opponent can be anything. Opponent can be an attacker, right? Attacker is also an opponent for your organization. It can be some other organization, a competitor, right? Who's trying to get inside your network, steal your data. It can be anyone, right? It can be advanced persistent threats as well. So we have APT groups. We'll discuss about APT groups. So those are also adversaries, right? So we are not only finding out the vulnerabilities, right? My motive is to check that even if there is a vulnerability in the systems, even if there is a vulnerability in different like my web application or cloud environment anywhere, if my organization is able to detect it, detect me when I'm inside the network or inside the web application or inside that environment, and how they respond to it, that's my work, right? That is called red teaming, right? So it mimics the real world attackers using stealth, persistence, and creativity to achieve specific objectives like data exfiltration, privilege escalation, or domain compromise, right? Now I used three terms: data exfiltration, privilege escalation, and domain compromise. Stealing data. So what I'm doing, I'm exfiltrating or stealing the data from the systems to my system or to anywhere where I want to store it without getting caught. That's why we call it stealthy. We have to make it stealthy, right? We don't want to get caught. Once I'm caught, my red team assessment is closed, right? Privilege escalation means moving your privileges or elevating your privileges from one user to another. So if I'm talking about privilege escalation, so if you are user 1 and you want the privileges of user 2, right, that is privilege escalation. You are able to access whatever privileges or whatever things user 2 is able to access. So that you have done privilege escalation. Privilege escalation can be done to root also, root or admin, right? So if you are a user, a normal user of the system, and you want to elevate or escalate your privileges, you found some vulnerability and you got a way by which you can access all the things, all the files, all the directories that root user or admin user can access. That is called privilege escalation also. Now, if you are moving from normal user to another normal user, this is called horizontal privilege escalation. If you are moving from normal user to root user, that is called vertical privilege escalation, right? The third thing that I told is domain compromise. What can be domain compromise? What we have for the identity and access management and managing the users, the devices, everything, all the objects in your network, we use Active Directory, right? Active Directory has something called domain. Domain has all these objects inside, like users, computers, their privileges, what they are able to access, what they are not able to access, right? So if you are able to access and take the whole access of the domain, that is called domain compromise, right? Now if we talk about the characteristics of red teaming. The first thing, it is goal oriented, right? It's not only that you have to find out the bugs. You have to focus on achieving objectives. Like I'm giving you an objective that you have to do red teaming, the red teaming assessment. Your goal is to steal sensitive data. You are doing assessment, red teaming assessment of Amazon, let's say. So you have to find out the credit card details of the users, right? So it's not just finding bugs. Second, it is covert. Covert means closed. That means stealthy. It operates stealthily to avoid detection by blue teams, right? And it can be multi-vector. Now, what is a vector? Or if I say attack vector. So attack vector is the path that attacker takes to lure a victim or to take the access or perform the attack, right? So attacker can take multiple vectors like physical vector, right? That means the attacker can physically get inside the organization without getting caught. Plug in a USB to a server and then come back and get the access of the system. That is what physical vector. Attacker can do social engineering, right? Or red teamers, they do social engineering. What is social engineering? Hacking the human, in simple terms, that you are convincing a user to reveal the details, reveal confidential details like their username, their password, or anything. So if I call, like if I'm doing an assessment, during an assessment, I call an employee and I say that, hi, I'm talking from IT team and I just want to know that I know your username and password, but there is multi-factor authentication being used, and in that multi-factor authentication, the second factor is push notification. So that push notification will be in your mobile phone. We are testing for a vulnerability, and uh, we have to fix it as soon as possible, as directed by the CISO. So I want you to click on yes and allow me the access. So the person will think if they have the username and password, so that means they are a legit person talking from the IT team, and they will share their, they will give the access basically. That is what, that is social engineering that they can do, right? So all the tactics that can be used, all the points of the entry that can be used, those are vectors, right? And the most important thing, that it is realistic. So it emulates insider threats or advanced persistent threats. Advanced persistent threat is a term coined to type of attack that takes the access of your system, stay inside your system for as long as they can until they get caught, and steal all the information, get all the data, get all the information about you, right? That is what realistic means, right? And it is not only one team, it is collaborative. Collaborative means it often involves blue team and white teams, right? So blue teamers are the defenders who will defend for the attacks, and white teamers are kind of managers, or you can say facilitators, who will tell the scope, who will tell if the attack is going perfectly smoothly or not, right? So this is what red teaming is. Clear? Next thing that we have is penetration testing versus red teaming. So penetration testing and red teaming are not same. Penetration tests are loud. Now what do we mean by loud? So usually what happens, pen testers, they won't put much effort into trying to go undetected. Unlike real attackers, they don't mind being easy to detect because they have been contracted to find as many vulnerabilities as they can. in many devices as possible, right? On the other hand, red team assessment is stealthy, right? Once you are caught, red team assessment is closed. Then the non-technical attack vectors might be overlooked in the pen test. So the attack based on social engineering or physical intrusions, they are not usually included in what is tested, right? Now in red teaming, we do social engineering, we do physical intrusions, we do physical attacks. Then third one is relaxation of security mechanisms. So while doing a regular pen test, some of the security mechanisms might be temporarily disabled or relaxed for the pen testing team in favor of efficiency. Although this might sound counterintuitive, it is essential to remember that pen testers have limited time to check for the vulnerabilities, and it is usually desired not to waste their time searching for exotic ways to bypass intrusion, deception, or other security measures, but rather focus on reviewing critical technological infrastructure for vulnerabilities. Right? Red teaming, when we talk about, first we have to simulate real world attacks, right? So we are doing simulation of real world attacks. In penetration testing, we are just identifying and exploiting the vulnerabilities. The scope for the red teaming is broad and it is goal based basically, as we have discussed. Like access the crown jewels, right? Crown jewels means the sensitive data. Now, when we talk about scope of the pen test, it is narrow, right? Asset based. That means if I'm saying that you have to do a pen test, test a web application, find out the vulnerabilities, and in this pen test of the web application, there are certain places you cannot test. Let's say I ask you to test InfosecTrain, but you cannot test infosectrain.com/admin. That's not allowed. Like from outside, what you can do without getting the admin, without accessing the admin page, right? Then the duration. The duration for red teaming is weeks to months, right? And for penetration testing, days to weeks, right? Like 3 weeks, 4 weeks max. Now, what we are testing in red teaming, we are evaluating the blue team's ability to detect and respond, right? And in penetration testing, we rarely test detection or response. Reporting in red teaming, if we talk about the reporting, so it is narrative driven. Attack path, the impact, everything is given, right? In penetration testing, it is vulnerability centric, right? So you talk about CVs, common vulnerabilities and exposure, that these are the CVs and this is the severity of the vulnerability, right? Now, red team assessment is often unknown to the defenders. Like we have discussed that it is a collaborative thing that defend blue teamers also work, but blue teamers are working like their day-to-day operations, right? They are not aware that someone is trying red team assessment is going for the organization, because we are trying to test how they will respond to this vulnerability, how they will respond to the attack if attack is detected, or whether they will be able to detect the attack or not, right? Now in the penetration testing, it is known to the system owners and security teams. So sometimes security teams are also involved, the internal security teams of the organizations are involved in the penetration testing. The outcome of red teaming is strategic insight into resilience and gaps, that what you should do, what impact was there for the organization if someone exploits this vulnerability and finds out this way, of exploitation, and in the penetration testing, those are tactical insights, right? So, for example, if I say that there is a red team, right? So, red team will send phishing emails, it will gain initial access, then move laterally from one system to another, then exfiltrates the HR data, all while avoiding the detection, right? In penetration testing, what will happen? The pen testers will scan the HR web app, find SQL injection, and reports it with remediation steps, right? So that is the difference between penetration testing and red teaming. Next, we have types of red teaming. So there are different types of red teaming which happens. First one is external red teaming. What do you think? So, Mr. Murli, red teaming is basically a stealthy approach which is not loud as penetration testing. It is a simulation of the attackers, that how the attackers will attack without having any knowledge about the organization, and it is a goal based assessment, right? Penetration testing is vulnerability centric and it is a asset based. So I am giving you a web application to test, or I'm giving you few network devices to test. Only that is your scope. So the scope is narrow and the duration is less in penetration testing. The scope in red teaming is broad and the duration is more as compared to penetration testing, like weeks to months, right? Now, when we are talking about external red teaming, the types of red teaming. So the first one is external red teaming, performing attacks outside organization. They may called external red teaming. So this type of red team engagement simulates an attack from outside the organization, like from hacker or other external threat, right? That how they will attack. So the goal of external red teaming is to test the organization's ability to defend against external attacks and identify any vulnerabilities that could be exploited by the attackers. Then we have internal red teaming. Now, internal red teaming, you can call it assumed breach. So this type of red team engagement assumes that its systems and networks have already been compromised by the attackers, like from an insider threat or from an attacker who has gained unauthorized access to a system or network by using someone else's login credentials, which they may have obtained through a phishing attack or other means of credentials theft, right? So that we assume. Now, the goal of this internal red team is to test the organization's ability to defend against these threats and identify any potential gaps that the attacker could exploit. So, what I'm doing, I'm inside the network. Now, I'm trying to find if there is a person who is a disgruntled employee. Now, that employee wants to exploit something using their privileges or want to elevate or escalate their privileges, then what they will do, what they could do. So that's internal red teaming. Now you have to give red teamers the credentials, right? So that they can be the part of the network and then they can find out what impact and how much in depth they can go, right? Then we have physical red teaming. Physical red teaming, it simulates an attack on the organization's physical assets like buildings, equipments, and infrastructure. Now, the goal of physical red teaming is to test the organization's ability to defend against physical threats and identify any weaknesses that attackers could exploit to allow for entry. Right? So, physically, the red teamer, the assessor, is going inside the organization and finding out that what they can do. Then we have hybrid red teaming. Hybrid red teaming combines the elements of different types of red teamings we have discussed, right? So, simulating a multifaceted attack on the organization. So, the goal is to test the organization's overall resilience to a wide range of attacks. So, first external I got the credentials, then I went in internal, then physical also. I sent someone from my team to plug in a USB or plug in a device and copy some data from internal uh, infrastructure, right? That can be what? That is the hybrid one. And then we have purple teaming. So this is a team of cybersecurity experts from the blue team, especially your SOC analyst or security engineers who are tasked with protecting the organization, and red team who work together to protect organizations from cyber threats. So the team uses a combination of technical expertise, analytical skills, and innovative strategies to identify and mitigate potential weaknesses in the networks and system, right? So that is what that is. So purple teaming basically means that there are red teamers also, blue teamers also. When red team assessment happens, so red teamers and blue teamers, they come together red, in the red team assessment. Then what happens? Red teamers will try to attack, blue teamers will try to detect, and then they will sit for the briefing sessions that what attacks red teamers did, they will tell, and how they detected, right? So that is what? That is purple teaming. Now, how red teaming happens? Like for penetration testing, we have a life cycle, right? We follow some steps. Like first we do reconnaissance, right? Then we do scanning, right? Then after that, enumeration happens. After enumeration, once you have the information, then system hacking you will do, and then cover tracks, right? These are the general steps. Now it depends on the methodology you are using, but these are the general steps which shows every single methodology of penetration testing. Like first you will gather the information about the target, then you will scan. Let's say you scan for open ports, you scan for vulnerabilities, the operating system being used. Then you will do the enumeration. So you will actively connect or actively communicate with the target, right? Now once you actively communicate with the target, so you will find out more information. Then after that, you will do system hacking. So once you have enough information that can help you to crack or get inside the system, then you will exploit that vulnerability which you have found and then cover the tracks. Remove every single thing that you have installed. All the backdoors, all the malwares, every single vulnerability you have exploited, everything you will remove. Now in red teaming, how it happens? The first thing that you have is reconnaissance again and red team attack lifecycle. So you will gather the information about the target organization passively or actively, right? So there are two ways of gathering the information, passively or actively. Passively means that you are not interacting with the target, you are finding out information which is available on public websites, or you are going through the network traffic. You are not interacting, so the target does not know that someone is gathering data about you, right? So if there is an organization InfosecTrain and you start gathering data about InfosecTrain on different websites, so we'll never get to know that you are trying to gather the information, right? Now, actively means that you are pinging the InfosecTrain's domain, you are sending some probes, and you are trying to find out the open ports by sending the Nmap scans, right? So that is active reconnaissance. So that you are actively interacting with me and finding out the information, right? Now, once you have gathered the information, then we have initial compromise. Now, initial compromise, or you also call it initial access. So it means that you are gaining access to the target environment through external facing vulnerabilities or user interaction, right? Either you are doing phishing. Phishing means sending emails to the employees and waiting eh, for them to click, or you are exploiting the vulnerabilities. Let's say there is web applications, so you are exploiting the vulnerabilities in the web applications, or you are doing credential stuffing, right? Now credential stuffing means that you found a list of passwords, leaked passwords. You are trying those passwords everywhere in multiple places, right? That is credential stuffing. Now, once you're done with that, once you have the initial access or you have initially compromised the system, then you will establish persistence. What if you did credential stuffing? The password that you tried, it worked this time, now it's changed. Then what will you do? The path or the way using which you got inside the system, it's closed, right? So what you will do, you will ensure continued access even after the reboots or user logs out. Like, you will create scheduled task. So what are scheduled tasks? Scheduled tasks are the tasks that you create in Windows, and similarly they are called cron jobs in Linux systems. What you do, you write a code so that the code executes every time, that task executes every time the system is powered on, right? So many times we have seen that whenever we power on our system, Microsoft Teams open automatically, right? So what is that? That task is scheduled for opening after the reboot, after powering on the system, right? So you can create scheduled tasks. You can implant backdoors, right? Backdoors are what? Basically, these are the piece of code, or you can call it malware, which will give you the access of the system, right? Which will open the door for you. You can connect to the system every time once the system is powered on. So what you are doing, you are creating a hidden user, let's say, right? Through that user, you can access the system. That is what means by establishing the persistence. Then you will escalate your privileges. Now let's say I landed on a user who's a normal user of the system in a domain, right? Now from that domain user or normal user, I have to escalate my privileges, right? So move from a low privilege user to system or domain admin, right? You will find misconfigured services, you will find out the kernel based exploits, and you will elevate your privileges, right? Then after elevating your privileges, you will do internal reconnaissance. Internal reconnaissance means map the internal network, identify the valuable assets, right? So you will do the enumeration, the discovery of users, the groups, how they are mapped with each other. And once you have done internal reconnaissance, then you will find out a way to perform lateral movement. Lateral movement means pivot across systems using stolen credentials or remote execution. Reach high value targets like domain controller, file servers, move from one system to another. Once you have moved from one system to another, so then you will do data analysis, that if there is any data useful for you, and collect the sensitive data, personally identifiable information, financial data, intellectual property, databases, emails, right? Now, this whole thing will continue, right, until you escalate or elevate your privileges to an admin user. Once you are an admin user, then you will exfiltrate and complete the mission, right? Transfer the stolen data out of the network and demonstrate the impact, right? So through HTTPS, you can transfer the data. Through DNS tunneling, you can transfer the data. So you have to show the business risk. You have to take over the domain, or data breach simulation you have to do, right? And here something is written C2. So we use lots of tools, like we use Cobalt Strike, right? This is the most famous one that we use. There is Silver also that we use, right? So these are command and control tools, and it is central to all the phases. That's why it's written in middle. So it maintains communications with the compromised host. You are elevating your privileges, moving to another user, doing the reconnaissance again, literally moving to another user. So who is communicating with those hosts or with those devices? The C2, the command and control server running in the attacking machine of yours. So that is how your red team attack life cycle works. Next thing that we have to understand is TTP. TTP stands for tactics, techniques, and procedures, right? That we follow. The tactics, techniques, and procedures of the attacker. Now, tactic means the goal or objective of the attacker. So the goal or objective of the attacker can be, let's say, reconnaissance, gathering the information. Now, for reconnaissance, what technique they will use? Technique means the method used to achieve the tactic. So, reconnaissance, for reconnaissance, I am doing active scanning. That is what? That is a technique. And then we have procedure. So, the specific implementation of a technique in the given context. So, I will be using Nmap to perform active scanning to complete the technique, right? So, the whole step by step walkthrough that what you will do is the procedure to complete the technique, right? So, there is an attack, right, which is called Kerberos. You might have heard the name. Now, in this Kerberos attack, what we are doing first, the tactic will be credential access. That means attacker wants to steal the credentials. The technique I will use will be Kerberos, abusing the service accounts to extract the hashes. And the procedure will be what? Enumerate the service accounts, dump the encrypted service ticket hashes using the tool Rubius, crack the hashes offline using a, let's say, hashcat tool, and use the cracked password to escalate the privileges. So this is the step by step procedure that we'll do. So this is what tactic, technique, and procedure is. Next thing we have is Mitre attack framework. Those who are not aware about Mitre attack, right? So Mitre is an organization who started attack framework in 2013, right? To document the common tactics, techniques, and procedures that advanced persistent threats use against Windows enterprise networks. Now, attack was created out of a need to document the attacker's behavior for use within the MITRE research project, right? So we needed a framework to address four main issues, right? First issue was adversary behavior. right? So focusing on the adversary tactics and techniques allowed us to develop analytics to detect possible adversaries' behaviors. So typical indicators like domains, IP addresses, file hashes, registry keys, they were easily changed by the attackers and they were only useful for point in time detection. They didn't represent how attackers they interact with the system. Only that they likely interacted at some time, right? It only tells that. And the second problem was the life cycle models that didn't fit. So existing the adversary life cycle and cyber kill chain concepts, they were too high level to relate behaviors to defenses. So the level of abstraction wasn't useful to map the TTPs to new types of sensors. Then its applicability to real environment. So TTPs needed to be based on observed incident to show the work is applicable to real environment, right? And the fourth one was common taxonomy. So TTPs they need to be comparable across different types of adversary groups using the same terminology, right? So that was the problem. Now what is attack? Attack is a largely knowledge base of adversarial techniques, a breakdown and classification of offensively oriented actions that can be used against particular platforms like Windows. So, unlike prior work in this area, the focus isn't on the tools and malware that adversary use, but on how they interact with systems during an operation. So, attack organizes these techniques into a set of tactics to help to explain to provide context for a technique. Each technique involves information that's relevant to both red team or penetration tester for understanding the nature of how a technique works, and also to a defender for understanding the context surrounding events, right? So tactics represent why of an attack technique. The tactic is the adversary's tactical objective for performing an action. So it serves as useful contextual category for individual techniques and cover standard. Techniques, they represent how an adversary achieves a tactical objective by performing an action. So let's say an attacker may dump credentials to gain access to useful credentials within a network that can be used later for the lateral movement. And techniques also represent what an adversary gains by performing an action. So if I have performed an action, that then what they will gain, then what they will get, right? So this is a useful distinction for the discovery tactic, as techniques highlight what type of information an attacker is after with a particular action, right? Nowadays attack has expanded quite significantly, like from many years, from Windows to other platforms and technologies, and it's in use by many different government organizations, industry sectors, including financial, healthcare, retail, and technology. Now if I show you the attack, so if you see here, this is the attack framework. Attack stands for adversarial tactic, technique, and common knowledge. Right? At the top that you are able to see, there are total 14 tactics. Like reconnaissance, resource development, initial access, execution, persistence, privilege escalation, defense evasion, credential access, discovery, lateral movement, collection, command and control, exfiltration, and impact. So in red team, what we do in red teaming, we follow these tactics. Now, not every single tactic is followed, right? Now, below tactics, to complete those tactics, the techniques are written, right? So for reconnaissance, like we have active scanning, gather victim host information, gather victim identity information, gather victim network information, victim organization information, phishing for gathering the information, search closed sources, search open technical databases, search open websites, search victim owned websites, right? So these are what? These are the techniques to perform reconnaissance. Now, how we know what techniques to follow, what techniques not to follow, or what tactics to we need in our environment, what tactics are not needed, because not every tactic is needed, right? Every time you start, maybe you stole the credentials, let's say using phishing, right? Now you have stolen the credentials using phishing, then you don't need resource development. Directly you will do the initial access, right? Or using phishing, you can even you're not gathering the information, you got the credentials, so it is directly initial access, not reconnaissance, not resource development required, right? So we follow the footstep of whom? Advanced persistent threat groups. So there are certain threat groups, their way of attacking, their behavior of attacking, and then we try to follow them. Like there is APT group 29, right, which is also called Cozy Bear, right? So there was, if you guys know about it, in 2021 there was an attack, solar winds attack, right? So this solar winds attack was done by these people. How they work? Now this is Mitre attack navigator. What I will do, I will create a new layer, enterprise layer. Now these are all the layers. Now I want to see that what tactics and techniques are used by APT group 29. So let me show you what we need to do. Let's search for APT 29. Here it shows thread groups. Select all. Close this. Sorry, close this. Then layer controls, color setup. Yeah, it's fine. Background color, let's say this one. Now the highlighted ones that you are able to see in red, these are the tactics and techniques used by the APT group 29. So their behavior is that they directly start from initial access, right? They are not doing reconnaissance or resource development. They exploit public facing application or external remote services, trust relationships, or valid accounts. Then they do the execution, cloud administration command, exploitation for client execution, Windows management instrumentation, then persistence, right? Boot or log on initialization scripts, external remote services, then privilege escalation they will do, then defense evasion, credential access, discovery, lateral movement, collection, command and control. That's it. So out of 14, they are using 10 tactics, right? So if I want to find out in my organization that if my organization's network is vulnerable to, like if I follow the footstep of APT group 29, will I be able to get the access? So what I have to do, I have to follow these steps, all of them. So that is what is your Mitre attack framework, right? All the tactics, starting from reconnaissance till impact, we have seen, right? Next thing is that when we are testing, so we test the Active Directory, right? Now, when we are testing the Active Directory, so what we have like to first understand what is Active Directory. So, in your opinion, what is an Active Directory? So, when we are talking about Active Directory, it is a directory service developed by Microsoft that runs on Windows Server, and it is used to manage users, computers, and resources in a networked environment, especially an enterprise domain. So think of it as a central brain of a Windows based organization. It controls who can access what, when, and how. Right now, when we are talking about Active Directory, so we have components in the Active Directory, right? So first we have logical components. Logical components define how Active Directory is structured conceptually, how objects are organized, grouped, and managed. So what are the logical components? First component, as I have given the name, object. What is an object? Anyone? Anything like computer or user ID? So objects are the fundamental units in Active Directory, and it can be a user, computer, group, printer, shared folder, anything, right? Then we have something called OUs, organizational units. Organizational units are containers which are used to logically group the objects, right? So if I create an organizational unit, OU equals to sales, all the sales users, all the sales devices will be listed inside it, right? When I will have to implement a policy, so I will implement a policy for the sales group, and it will be implemented in all the devices inside organizational unit, right? Then we have domains. What is a domain? So domain is the core unit of Active Directory structure. It represents a security boundary. Each domain has its policies and trust relationships. Then we have domain trees as well. So it is a hierarchy of domains that share a contiguous namespace, right? So if I'm saying that there is a domain corp.com, right? Then in corp.com we have sales.corp.com and hr.corp.com, right? This is a tree, a combination of domains, right? Then we have something called forest. Forest is a top level container that holds one or more domain trees. All the domains in the forest, they share a common schema, right? And it can have multiple child domains. So the first domain that you create an Active Directory network, that first domain is the name of the forest. Next, we have physical components, right? In physical components, what we have domain controller. Domain controller is the server that is having the Active Directory services. It stores the database of the Active Directory and it handles the authentication, replication, and policy enforcement. So if you want to enforce a policy, so through the domain controller, it will be happening, right? One more thing is global catalog server. So it is a special domain controller that stores partial replica of all object in the forest. Just think of it. This is domain A in the image. This is domain B. Now, if a person, if a user in domain A wants to get some information about a user in domain B, so directly it cannot get the information. So what this will do, it will go to the global catalog server of domain B and ask that if device B is there, so can you give me just some information about it, what it does. Then global catalog server will give the information on the basis of the trust between both of the domains, right? So these are the things that you should know. Now, when we are talking about the Active Directory, so let me show you what we have is, right? Now, the very first thing that you have to do in Active Directory is reconnaissance. Reconnaissance means gathering the information about the Active Directory, find out the IP addresses, find out the information about the users if you are able to do, right? And then you do the enumeration also, more information after interacting with the Active Directory. So we will be doing the interaction, but let me just show you how our Active Directory looks like. Pretty much packed. And very much complex, right? So in this Active Directory, you can see there is a domain 7kingdoms.local where we have a domain controller King's Landing, right? Another one is North 7kingdoms.local and Essos.local, right? Where there are multiple users like Eddard, Catalan, North, Jor, Nightwatch, Starks, right? They are the admins. Then here, Danny is the admin, right? Dothraki is the admin. Khal Drogo is the MySQL admin, right? There are servers, server 1, WS01, Wazoo, and Elk also installed for defensive side, right? Now, let's say I just am not aware about this diagram, that how it looks like, what it is. I have to do the enumeration and I have to do the reconnaissance, right? So let me show you what we need to do. I just know the IP of it. So very first thing that I will do is I will find out that in the whole network how many IP addresses are up and running. So we can see there is 192.168.56.10 for 7 kingdoms dot local. Dot 11 for Winterfell dot north 7 kingdoms dot local. 12 for Essos dot local. Then 22 for Castle Black dot north dot 7 kingdoms dot local. Then Bravos dot Essos dot local. Then we have another for dot 100, no name for it, and there is dot 1, right? Now we know the IPs. What we will do for the reconnaissance? What is the first thing we should do? Scan for open ports. Okay. Let's do it for 10 dot, sorry, 56.10. So it's giving 139, 53, 3389, 445, 80, 135 open. Another port 49672. So this is scanning happening, reconnaissance and scanning. To find out, we found the IP and then we picked up the IP of the first domain and then we are scanning it to find out the open ports. Now these open ports will help me out in finding that where through which port we can gather more information. See, as I said, that the very first thing is reconnaissance. We found the open ports. Now we are doing the enumerate. We'll do the enumeration, right? We'll try to find out if any of the ports are showing me the information about the passwords or usernames, and we have to try multiple ways to check if any port is revealing any of the information, right? So whenever you are testing any active directory, in that active directory it's not about finding that if there is a vulnerability, right? It is just you are abusing the features because some of the features were misconfigured by the person who implemented those features. Let's see what we can do if we can find out any of the password. Parallelly, while the scan is running, okay, it's done. So how many total ports? Let's see. $29. So there are 29 ports open. So alternator Vagrant 5986, 5985 not useful for us. 3389, 3268 LDAP is running, so we can do use LDAP, right? Then 445 K password 5, okay, T8135 and 389. So LDAP plain text is running and HTTP also plain text running, IIS server running, right? Now what if I want to find out users? Just think of it. I have done this, but what if I use hyphen users? Will I be able to find out the users? 192.168.56.10 King's Landing, signing true, SMBV1 false. No. Let's try for other IPs. Let's say for 11. Yep. For 11, we were able to find out the users. SMBV1 false, trying with protocol, enumerated domains. So Arya Stark, Sansa Stark, right? Brandon Stark, Recon Stark, Brainless Giant, Jon Snow, Samwell. So the person who created this user placed the password in the description. When the person placed the password in the description, then it is showing us. That is what? That is how you do enumeration. Enumeration can also be done with enum for Linux, and just write 192.168.56.11. See how much information it is giving you. Yes, I'm in the same network. If you want to do the scanning, you have to be in the same network. So, do you see what information it is giving you? Domain group memberships, right? What users have what domain groups and what memberships, right? Then you are getting the password policy. Minimum password length 5 and password history length 24 and maximum password age 311 days 2 minutes. Password complexity flag 00, domain refuse password, minimum password age, reset account lockout 5 minutes. So if I do any brute force attack on any of the accounts, the account will be locked for 5 minutes. And same like your crack map exec output, you're also getting the output for the SQL service, you are getting the output for all the users, right? So by the enumeration, what we have found that there is a user with the name Samuel Tarley having password Heartsbane, which we have found. Can you see this? Server allows sessions using username empty and password empty. We are getting the SID of the domain as well, right? Can't get OS info. Yeah. So that was only the relevant information for us, right? Now we'll see in the next session that after enumeration, if we are able to brute force and find the like privileges of the users, and once finding out the privileges of the users, how we'll be able to exploit the services and move with the user. So how the user you have got, how to poison and perform the relay attacks and perform the exploitation, right? So this is how your reconnaissance, scan and enumeration happens, right?